Hello, hi. Today we're gonna discuss headlines. A report that was actually recently done by Nanyang Technological University and Kuan School of Public Policy, which actually triggered quite some opinions and thoughts. Which is a family of four need at least $6,693 a month to
Mm-hmm.
afford a basic standard of living in Singapore. So
Okay.
I mean, like this report itself actually highlight like the financial challenges faced by a family of four, which actually needs this amount, the $6,693 a month to afford a basic standard of living. And of course, this include parents with a preteen as well as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
So this minimum income standards report actually suggests establishing a minimum wage floor, which we will not dive too deep into, as well as the need to actually reform CPF itself, as well as the social cost of living itself.
Mm-hmm.
So for us itself, our discussion will be focusing mainly on these different various type of household income, and of course to understand a little bit more as well. But Daniel, for you, what's your thought on like the modern Singapore society itself? These numbers itself, $6,693 a month for a
Mm-hmm.
family of four,
Yeah.
for a couple with a preteen as well as a teenager itself.
Mm-hmm.
How how is it in the context of the country that we're living in, which is Singapore itself? Yeah,
Yes. So, for a family of four,
yeah,
that means a partner, husband and wife,
yeah,
as well as two teen children. I mean, of course, the
yeah.
context has to be set right, as in
We are in Singapore itself.
the kind of
The
standard of
Singapore itself
living, the
and the
lifestyle.
lifestyle.
Yes. Yes.
And of course, I mean, like we have to understand and appreciate as well that we are in Singapore.
Mm.
So of course, the cost of living in Singapore is also higher
Yeah.
compared to our neighboring countries as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that so as we have to consider that it's four different individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So with varying level of needs as well for each individuals at different stages in their life as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and of course, we have to also understand the material and non-material needs as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So of course, I think fundamentally, Singapore being a modern country itself,
Mm-hmm.
we do have certain things that we need to fulfill as well, and I think that it is. Later on in the video itself, of course, we will look at the breakdown in terms of
Sure.
the different
Sure.
varying expenses that will be incurred on a monthly basis, and whether these numbers of 6,693 is too high, too low, or just right. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that will also be understanding as well in terms of Singapore context
Mm-hmm.
on things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately we are progressing as a society, a Singaporean society, beyond just the basic level of needs.
Mm-hmm.
So our basic level of needs, of course, we're talking about this our covering our food, our housing expenses, like our mortgages, our daily utility bills and all these
Basic
things,
needs
basic
and
needs,
yes, yes.
and basic education needs. But I think we have progressed beyond that as a society,
Yes,
right?
with a tinge of a lifestyle
With a tinge of a
expenses.
lifestyle, a need to participate within a society as
Yes, the
well,
community as well.
community
Yes.
as well, and living a dignified life with choices. I
Mm-hmm.
think the key thing here is a dignified life with choices. We
Mm-hmm.
are going beyond just a society where where we just basically just the food, sleep, education, and work. That's all. I think we are beyond that already. And then we these days we're also talking a lot more about mental wellness as well,
Yes.
and as a society, and we are looking beyond just just our basics. We need to look at and explore and understand and empathize that the society need to be involved with the rest of the community as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important because I think that the human needs to partake in the social life is something that we cannot neglect in today's context.
Mm-hmm.
And the importance of building solidarity among the stakeholders in Singaporeans
Mm-hmm.
as a whole as well.
Yeah.
So these are the things that we will look at. And of course, based on the latest report itself, this minimum income standard report itself for
Yeah.
2023 itself, right?
Yeah.
It has been categorized into five main segments. So single parent with one child between 2 to 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So the minimum income standards monthly, right, is actually 3,369.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for partners with two children, which is between 7 to 1 preteens between 7 to 12 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and another teenager between 13 to 18 years old,
Mm-hmm.
they'll require 6,693 a month. And
Mm-hmm.
for a single person, between pre-retiree between 55 to 64 years old, they will
Yes.
require $1,857 a month. And for a single person, which is 65 years old and older, which
Yeah.
we will assume is a retiree, will require lesser, which is like 1,492. And the final household that we are looking at is, of course, a couple which is 65 years old and older.
Mm-hmm.
And the minimum they will actually require is actually $2,551.
Yep.
So based on these numbers, I think we can have certain inference of these different groups itself. And one key group that we will notice that is that for partner parents with two children, you have the highest requirement.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one thing that we can understand is that family building is in Singapore is expensive,
Comes with a cost.
and with a cost, and
Yes.
then with especially with children, significant amount is actually required. So if you
Yes.
look at the first one that actually I discussed, right, which is a single parent with a child that's between 2 to 6 years old,
Mm-hmm.
requiring $3,369
Yes.
a month.
Yes.
So and versus a pre-retiree single between 55 to 64, which requires only $1,857 a month.
Yes.
That figures is almost close to double.
Yep.
So we can also understand and infer from there, right, Daniel, that
Yes.
that a parent with a child is costly. And I mean, like, for you, Daniel, what's your opinion on a partner parent with two children? Because I think you do have like this experience of having children that's preteens and teenagers. So what's your
Yes.
opinion on that in terms of the numbers?
The numbers initially looks a little bit interesting to me,
Mm.
but on hindsight, I basically felt that because when I see this figure, immediately it actually draws me to the current medium income.
Mm.
So I do not have the exact info with me at this moment, but if my mind serves me well, I think we are at about slightly, the current median income is probably slightly in excess of 4K a month.
Yeah.
So with that, I think I'm still heartened to see that a family of four and with two teenager children,
Yeah.
all right, at 6,693, it is still an acceptable figure if you're actually asking me. But I'm not so sure in terms of the constitutions of this figure as well, whether like expenses like transportation, does the family drive and that kind of stuff. And I would choose to believe like things like parental obligations are probably
Correct.
not factored in
Correct.
as well. So
Yeah.
we are looking solely on basic living expenses to sustain a family of four.
Within the family nucleus
Yes.
of four. That's all. We're not
Yes,
even talking
yes.
about extended families. Obligation to extended families.
Yes.
So I think that is one. And of course, I mean, like, if we think about it, I mean, like, children, when preteens and teenagers itself, we will expect a higher cost as well,
most
because
definitely.
most definitely they need to
Yeah.
partake in a social life with their peers.
Yes.
And of course, if we talk about all this group itself with these two children, preteen and teenagers, right? Even if we talk about holiday planning itself, we are talking about traveling during the peak seasons, in June and December. Because if you want to talk about traveling together as a family of four itself to certain countries, usually air tickets and all these things costs are usually higher if you are traveling during the peak seasons in June and December periods itself,
Yes,
which will
yes.
indirectly increase the cost as well. So that's a natural phenomenon in terms of having obligations to your spouse, as well as obligation to your children itself. That will lift up the aggregate cost of monthly costs. So
Yes.
that numbers are definitely. And of course, one interesting thing that I noticed from these numbers itself is that a single person pre-retiree between 55 to 64 years old requires 1,857
Yes.
a month, while a retiree, I would assume a retiree 65 years old and above, require lesser, 1,492, 1,492, which is about $400 less. What's your take on this, Daniel, on these numbers itself? Yeah.
I think again when we look at projections from CPF board in terms of the CPF lives payout
Yeah.
at the very lowest tier, which is to be able to sustain very basic lifestyle when you go into retirement, which I believe at this moment it is at around 1,003, tops 1,004. So I
Yeah.
think over here 1,857 is still acceptable. Probably moving towards the middle tier lifestyle,
Middle.
retirement lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm quite interesting is that for these numbers itself, especially for a single person, 65 years old and older, right? Based on my observation itself, is that because when we are working, okay, and then we usually only have when we talk about spending itself, usually our spending as a working adult itself usually is higher on weekends. So on Saturday, Sunday, when we're going out with our families, with our peers, and all these things, usually our expenses are higher, right?
Mhm.
And the fact that we talk about pre-retiree needing more than a retiree, and the fact that as a retiree, 65 years old and above, I believe you want an active retirement as well.
Yes.
So
Yes.
active retirement means that you will also be actively participating in social life, and that itself, I mean, like when we talk about a retiree, from Monday to Sunday is a weekend to you. And if we talk about retiring, right, I don't think you are just constrained to just the basic needs as well. I think you also want to explore traveling as well, which
Right.
will indirectly increase the cost as well. So this is a very interesting numbers that we see over here as well. This is number itself, because I would expect that as a retiree, I mean, like, I do not want to compromise on my lifestyle. I do not want to compromise on my standard of living just because I am retired, and I will want to travel as well, just like before I'm retired. So with that itself, I would naturally expect that somebody who is retired will treat Monday to Sunday like a weekend, and that naturally will increase a higher cost than pre-retiree. So that's an interesting number that we observe over here as well.
Yeah.
That a single person, 65 years old, actually require lesser than somebody who is pre-retiree. So
Yeah.
so that these are numbers, interesting numbers as well. So but these are the main five household type that we run through based on these numbers
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll be running through the MIS calculator to discuss specifically on this particular group, this headline group that we're talking about, which is partner parents with two children, one preteen and one teenager. So one is between 7 to 12 years old,
7
and
to
the
12.
other is
13
13
to
to 18 years old.
Yes. Yes.
So we'll be looking at the breakdown of these monthly figures
Yes.
to see whether how realistic are these numbers. Are these numbers on point, or are these numbers higher and lower? Of course, I mean, this ultimately is subjective,
Yes.
because it varies from families to families. So but again, we are talking about the general group itself. We will
Providing
look
some
at
references.
providing some references based on these numbers itself.
Yeah.
We'll look at how close to the median that we are. So we will look into the breakdown itself.
Right.
Okay, so now we are on this page, which actually is a online calculator on the minimum income standard itself, which is a very useful calculator for us to use as a references in terms of the breakdown of the expenses, the minimum income standard required for family nucleus, different family nucleus. So for the purpose of our video today, we'll be focusing on this particular family nucleus, which is a family of two itself, with a preteen, which is between 7 to 12 years old, as well as a teenager between 13 to 18 years old.
Yeah.
So we'll be working out on these numbers. So somebody who is married with two children, boy, and the second child, which is a preteen, girl. And then we will see the figures, the breakdown of the figures. So we can see that for this family nucleus of four, okay, with a preteen as well as a teenager, we will require $1,530 a week and $6,684 a month. Okay,
Right.
and it will be break down. The weekly budget will be break down into varying colors. In this pie chart itself, you can see that food, clothing, transportation, housing, household goods and services, healthcare and insurance, social participation, which we will talk about, as well as education and childcare itself for this family nucleus. Okay, and we can see that food comprises 24% weekly. Okay, so weekly, in fact, weekly we're not even talking about exorbitant figures as well. We are talking about food consumption in hawkers and food courts, as well as food and non-alcoholic beverages, not even alcoholic beverages. So it actually already comprises of 24% of that $1,530 a week. So that's a figure itself. And of course, clothing and personal care, I think is a reasonable figure as well. Like $40 a week on clothing, footwears, personal care, personal grooming, as well as personal effects. And our transportation, and we are talking about public transportation. We're not even talking about owning a car, or taking private hires. We're just talking about public transport, not private hires. It's already 9%. And housing maintenance, which is housing purchase and rentals, which is $315. And we're talking about housing purchase, which means obligation to your mortgage loans and housing maintenance, as well as household goods. So utility bills, I think is reasonable as well. I mean, like if you're talking about utility bills, right, which is like $45.40 a week, which works out to about $1,800 a month, right? No, sorry, not 1,800. Sorry, $180 a month. I think it's a reasonable.
I think
thereabout, right? I mean, like even for us, we see our utility bills on a monthly basis. We see that it's about $150 to $200. It's a reasonable sum. And then if you look at insurance as well, these are things that we can't do without. Healthcare and insurance, 6%. And social participation. In fact, what is interesting is that this social participation, right, communication, recreation, newspapers, holiday expenses, I think is already very, very, very reasonable, because we are talking about just 12% of your $1,530 a week. So it only works out to slightly below $200 a week on social participation, which is extremely reasonable figures to look at. And of course, for education and childcare, which is a necessity as well, for education and tuition for our kids are necessities. So it works out to the final figures, which is like 14%. And if we look at this breakdown itself, we can see that this minimum income standards, right, is actually really constrained to that family nucleus of four. We're not talking about parental obligations that I think that the sandwich generation might experience as well, having to commit to their children's responsibility as well as parental responsibility as well. So this number, I think that based on this breakdown itself, we can see that this $6,684 a month are reasonable. And I think that we're not even talking about materials like talking about exorbitant purchases like buying a luxury watch or luxury bags and all these things. We are not talking about that. We're talking about basic social participation, like even buying a cup of bubble tea. I don't think that is too much to ask for, right? When we talk about all these figures, we're not talking about buying a Rolexes or buying a Hermes bag and all these things. We're talking about just the basic. We're not even talking about private hires, taking from time to time taking private hires, or even owning a car and paying for your car expenses and all these things. So these are reasonable basic standards that I think that for the majority of Singaporeans with a family nucleus of four will need. Okay, so as this report has shown, right, it's actually useful as a basic guideline. Of course, I think ultimately these figures are subjective, because I mean, like, family nucleus are different, the family dynamics are different as well for different individuals. But it's a useful basic guidelines. But we must also ultimately recognize the ever increasing cost of living. Means that this minimum income standards will keep on rising, continue to increase in years to come. And of course, ultimately, based on also for me, in my personal opinion as well, is that in Stephen Covey's book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, he did cover because this model of circle of influence as well as circle of concern to actually distinguish between proactive people who focus on what they can do as well as influence, as well as reactive people who focus on things that are out of their control. And of course, although with all these numbers itself, I think it's a very good, useful reference guide in terms of what we need to do to get there, at least as a reference numbers. And I think it's important to actually recognize that with this standard of living and the fact that the reality of things is that we are Singaporeans and we are living in Singapore, in a country, a first world country, where the cost of living is higher than our neighboring countries. We have to recognize that. And I think a lot of times it is if we are not meeting these um, reference numbers, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of time is for us to actually take control of how we can actually focus on our circle of influence, to actually focus on things that we can do to actually meet the median figures. And it will also involve like constant development to actually increase our skill set, to make ourselves more valuable to our employers, as well as to focus on proper financial planning early, so that when the time comes with this higher rising minimum income standard itself, we are able to actually meet it in time to come when we are older, as well as proper family planning as well, making sure that because we also have to recognize that having children are not cheap in Singapore itself, with tuitions and all these things that comes with it itself.
Yes.
So proper family planning is also very important as well, to make sure that the family is right size financially.
Right.
And that is important, as well as to setting up our long-term care and healthcare insurance needs early as well, because in time to come, this long-term care and healthcare needs will also become like expenses to us. And this sharing today, I mean, like, there's also limiting in terms of the actual figures we will actually need for long-term care as well as insurance planning.
Right.
So but ultimately, by focusing on ourselves, by focusing on improving and creating a value, each of us individually, creating value to our employers and to our clients as well, it will actually enable us to actually eventually lead a dignified life with choices well into our retirement. I think that's important. And today's session itself is just a discussion on these figures itself, to see how realistic these numbers are, how close are these numbers to the actual general population itself, based on the family nucleus of 4. So I hope that in this session today itself, it's been a useful guideline, basic guideline. Of course, it's very subjective, of course, but I think it's ultimately still a good reference point. So we'll wrap up the session for today, and so I hope that you like our video, and please subscribe to our video if you enjoyed viewing them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you.